I pulled my truck over to the shoulder when I saw the police cruiser with its hood up, smoke curling into the cold air. I told Lily to stay buckled and stepped out into the wind. The officer turned at the sound of my boots on the gravel, and when she removed her sunglasses, the world stopped. It was Megan Hayes, the woman who had walked out of my life years ago without explanation, leaving wounds I thought I had buried. Now she stood in front of me while my 7-year-old daughter sat in the truck behind me, oblivious to the storm that had just begun. The woman standing beside the disabled cruiser looked older than the girl I remembered, her face sharper, her posture rigid in the winter light. But the eyes were the same, dark brown, guarded, searching my face the way they used to when she was trying to decide whether to tell me the truth or a version of it. Megan spoke first, her voice steady but low. She said my name like a question, like she wasn't sure I would answer. I nodded once, not trusting myself to say anything yet. Behind me, Lily shifted in her booster seat, humming something off key. The sound reminded me where I was, what I was doing, and how badly I wanted to get back in the truck and drive away. But I didn't. I walked toward the cruiser, my boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. Megan stepped back, giving me space to look under the hood. Steam rose from the radiator, and I could see the split hose before she said anything. It was a simple fix, the kind of thing that shouldn't have stranded anyone. But out here on the county road, help didn't come quickly. She must have known that when she pulled over. I asked if she had called for a tow. Megan said she had, but it would be a while. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't ask me anything. She just stood there with her arms crossed, watching me the way someone watches a stranger they're trying to place. It made me angry in a way I hadn't expected. The idea that she could look at me like that after everything. I told her I had a spare hose in the truck. It wasn't true, but I said it anyway because standing there doing nothing felt worse than lying. Megan thanked me, her voice flat, professional. She wasn't wearing a wedding ring. I noticed that before I could stop myself, and then hated that I had noticed at all. Lily called out from the truck, asking if we could go home soon. Her voice carried across the cold air, bright and impatient. Megan turned toward the sound, and something shifted in her expression. Not sadness exactly, something closer to recognition or loss. She asked if that was my daughter. I said yes, and didn't offer anything else. Megan nodded slowly as if she had expected it, as if the years had already told her this story. I went back to the truck and lied to Lily about the hose. I told her I needed to make a quick call, that we would be home soon. Lily asked if the police officer was in trouble. I said no, just car trouble. Lily said that was okay then because police officers helped people, so it was good that we were helping her back. The logic was simple, the kind only a 7-year-old could manage without bitterness. I stood outside the truck longer than I needed to, pretending to look through the toolbox in the bed. The truth was I didn't have a spare hose, and even if I did, I wasn't sure I could stand there long enough to install it. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from something older, something I thought I had buried under years of routine and discipline. Megan appeared beside me without warning. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine, which was the easiest lie I had told all day. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way she looked at me, the way her jaw tightened just slightly. She said she was sorry for the inconvenience, that she would wait for the tow truck, that I didn't need to stay. I told her I didn't have the hose. The words came out harder than I meant them to, almost like an accusation. Megan's expression didn't change. She said that was fine, that she appreciated me stopping anyway. Then she asked if Lily was my only child. The question felt like a test or maybe a trap. I said, yes, she is. Megan nodded again, slower this time, and looked back toward the truck where Lily's face was pressed against the window, her dark curls framing her curious eyes, watching us with open curiosity. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of manure and earth from the fields beyond the road. I remembered that smell from every winter of my life. The way it clung to my clothes and my skin, no matter how many times I washed. I had hated it once, back when I thought I might leave Willow Creek and follow Megan to the city. But I had stayed, and the smell had become something else. a reminder that some things didn't change even when everything else did. Megan said she had moved back to Willow Creek recently. She said it casually, like it didn't matter, like it was just another fact. I felt the words land in my chest, heavy and cold. I asked why. Megan said she had been reassigned, that the department needed someone with her experience. She didn't say how long she would be staying. I didn't ask. I told her the tow truck would come eventually, that she should stay in the cruiser to keep warm. Megan thanked me again, and this time there was something else in her voice, something that sounded almost like regret. I didn't want to hear it. I turned back toward my truck, toward Lily, toward the life I had built without Megan Hayes in it. But before I reached the driver's door, the memory hit me. Sharp and unbidden, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Years earlier, the night before Megan left for college, we had driven out to the lake at the edge of town. It was late summer, the air still warm, but carrying the first hint of autumn. We sat on the hood of my truck, our backs against the windshield, watching the stars come out one by one. Megan had been quiet all evening, and I thought it was because she was nervous about leaving. I told her it would be fine, that we would make it work. The distance didn't mean anything when two people wanted the same things. Megan had turned to look at me then, her face serious in the dim light. She said she believed me. She said she would come back every chance she got, that Willow Creek was still home, that I was still home. I had kissed her, tasting the cherry chapstick she always wore, feeling the softness of her hair against my hand. She had kissed me back, hard and desperate, like she was trying to memorize me. Before we left the lake, I told her I would wait. It didn't matter how long it took, I would be there when she came back. Megan promised she would come back. She promised a lot of things that night, and I had believed every one of them because I didn't know any better. I blinked, and the memory dissolved. I was standing beside my truck again, my hand on the door handle, my daughter humming behind the glass. Megan was still by the cruiser, her arms crossed against the cold, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine without looking back. Lily asked if the police officer was going to be okay. I said yes, someone was coming to help her. Lily asked if we would see her again. I said I didn't know, which was another lie. Willow Creek was small and Megan was a cop. Of course we would see her again. The question wasn't if, but how many times and how long. I could keep pretending it didn't matter. I pulled back onto the road and drove toward the farm, the fields stretching out on either side, bare and brown under the gray sky. Lily chattered about school, about her friend Maya's new puppy, about the art project she wanted to finish before dinner. I listened without hearing, my mind still caught on the image of Megan standing beside her cruiser, looking at me like she had something to say but didn't know how to start. By the time we reached the farm, the sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the barn and the pasture where the cows stood in their slow, patient clusters. I parked near the house and helped Lily out of the truck. She ran ahead, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, calling for Ruth, who was probably in the kitchen starting dinner. I stood in the driveway for a moment, breathing in the cold air, trying to clear my head. The farm was the only thing that had ever made sense to me. My grandfather had worked this land before me, had built something from nothing, with calloused hands and stubborn faith. The work was hard but predictable, the rhythms of it steady and unbreakable. I had built a life here, a good life, one that didn't require me to think too much about what I had lost or why, but now Megan was back. And the careful structure I had built felt suddenly fragile, like a house with a cracked foundation. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just another person in town, that I could ignore her the way I ignored everyone else who tried to get too close. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. Megan Hayes had never been just another person, and the years hadn't changed that. Inside the house, Lily was already telling Ruth about the police officer with the broken car. Ruth listened patiently, nodding in all the right places. But her eyes found mine over Lily's head. She didn't ask any questions, but I could see them there waiting. Ruth had raised me after my parents died when I was 8, and she knew me better than anyone. She would know something was wrong before I said a word. I hung my coat by the door and went upstairs to change. My room was the same as it had always been, plain and functional, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the south pasture. On the dresser sat an old photograph of my parents on their wedding day, my father's wide smile, and my mother's gentle eyes looking back at me. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Megan was back. That was the only fact that mattered, and it was the one fact I didn't know what to do with. Downstairs, I could hear Lily laughing, the sound light and easy. She didn't know what Megan meant, didn't know the history that stretched between us like a scar. To Lily, Megan was just a police officer who needed help. And maybe that was all she needed to be. Maybe I could keep it that way. Keep the past where it belonged, buried under years of silence and distance. But as I stood and walked back downstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the careful balance I had maintained for so long was about to tip. Megan wasn't just passing through, she was staying, and that changed everything. I saw Megan again at the farmer's market one morning when I had taken Lily into town to pick up feed and let her choose something from the baked goods table the way we did every weekend. It was routine, predictable, the kind of morning that required nothing from me except showing up. But when I turned the corner past the vegetable stands, Megan was there, standing near the honey vendor holding a small jar up to the light. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Lily tugged on my hand, asking if we could get cinnamon rolls. And the moment broke. Megan set the jar down and walked toward us, her stride steady and deliberate, the way cops walked when they were on duty, even if they weren't wearing the uniform. She was in jeans and a dark jacket. Nothing official, but I could still see the badge clipped to her belt. Megan said hello to Lily first, crouching down to her level and asking her name. Lily answered without hesitation, the way she did with everyone, open and trusting in a way that sometimes scared me. She told Megan about the cinnamon rolls and how her dad always let her pick 2 if she promised to share one with Ruth. Megan smiled, the kind of smile that looked almost real, and said that sounded like a good deal. I stayed quiet, watching the exchange with something tight in my chest. Megan stood and looked at me, her expression careful, neutral. She said it was good to see me again. I said nothing. I told Lily we needed to keep moving, that Ruth was waiting for us at home. Lily waved goodbye to Megan, who waved back. And then we were walking away back toward the truck, back toward the safety of distance, but distance didn't last. Later, Megan showed up at the farm. She pulled into the driveway in her cruiser when I was fixing a section of fence near the barn. I saw the car and felt my stomach drop. The same sinking feeling I had felt on the road before. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked toward her, forcing my expression into something flat and unreadable. Megan stepped out of the cruiser and explained before I could ask. There had been reports of livestock theft in the area, she said. 3 farms in the recent weeks, all within a short radius. The department was doing check-ins, making sure everyone knew to lock their barns and keep an eye out for anything unusual. She said it like it was routine, like she hadn't chosen to come here herself. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I told her I would keep the barn locked. Megan nodded and thanked me, but she didn't leave. She looked past me toward the pasture where the cows were clustered near the water trough and said, the place looked good, that I had done well with it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Megan turned back toward her cruiser, but before she opened the door, she asked if I ever thought about leaving. The question caught me off guard. I asked what she meant. Megan said she meant the farm, Willow Creek, all of it, whether I had ever wanted to go somewhere else. I told her no, I hadn't. This was where I belonged. My family had worked this land for 3 generations. It was in my blood. Megan looked at me for a long moment, and then she said she was glad one of us had figured that out. She got in the cruiser and drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway with a wrench in my hand and no idea what she had really been asking. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ruth asked me about the visit. She said she had seen the cruiser from the kitchen window and wanted to know if everything was all right. I told her it was just a routine check. Nothing to worry about. Ruth didn't look convinced. She set a cup of tea in front of me and sat down across the table, her hands folded in front of her. Ruth said she knew who Megan was. She had known the moment Lily mentioned the police officer with the broken car. I didn't ask how she knew. Ruth had lived in Willow Creek her entire life, and she remembered everything, especially the things people tried to forget. She said Megan's return must be hard for me. I said it wasn't, that it didn't matter, that it had been years and people moved on. Ruth didn't argue. She just looked at me with the quiet patience she had always had, the kind that made lying impossible. She asked me if I was protecting Lily or protecting myself. I didn't answer. I finished my tea and went upstairs, but the question followed me, settling into the silence of my room like something I couldn't shake. The next time I saw Megan, Lily was with me. We were at the hardware store picking up supplies for the irrigation system I had been meaning to fix for weeks. Lily was in the paint aisle, fascinated by the color samples when Megan walked in. She was in uniform this time, her radio clipped to her shoulder, her expression serious until she saw us. Megan walked over and said hello to Lily, who lit up immediately. She asked Megan if she had fixed her car, and Megan said yes, that it was working perfectly now. Lily said that was good because police officers needed cars that worked so they could help people. Megan agreed, and then she did something I didn't expect. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic badge, the kind they gave to kids at community events. She handed it to Lily and told her it was an honorary deputy badge just for her. Lily's face went bright with excitement, her brown eyes wide with wonder. She thanked Megan 3 times in a row, holding the badge like it was made of gold. I watched the exchange and felt something crack open inside me, something I had been holding shut for a long time. Megan glanced at me just for a second, and I saw the question there, the same one she had asked at the farm. But this time I didn't look away. On the drive home, Lily asked why I didn't like Officer Megan. The question came out of nowhere, casual and direct. The way kids asked things they didn't know were dangerous. I asked what made her think that. Lily said it was the way I looked at her, like I was angry but trying not to be. I told her I wasn't angry, that I just didn't know Megan very well. Lily said that was okay because Megan seemed nice and maybe we could get to know her better. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on the road and tried to ignore the weight of the plastic badge sitting on the seat between us. A small thing that felt like a threat. Time passed and Megan became part of the landscape. She was at the diner when I stopped for coffee. She was driving past the farm when I was out in the fields. She was everywhere, and I couldn't tell if it was coincidence or something else. I started avoiding town when I could, taking the long way home, skipping the farmer's market. But it didn't matter. Willow Creek was too small and Megan was too present. Then one evening, just after dark, I was out behind the barn replacing a section of fence that had rotted through. The work was slow, frustrating, the kind of thing that required patience I didn't have. I was halfway through when I saw headlights sweep across the field, slow and deliberate. A cruiser pulled up near the barn and Megan stepped out, her flashlight in hand. She called out to me, asking if everything was all right. I told her it was, that I was just fixing the fence. Megan walked closer, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. She said she had seen the light and wanted to make sure it wasn't anything suspicious given the thefts. I said I appreciated the concern, but I was fine. Megan nodded, but she didn't leave. She stood there, her flashlight aimed at the ground, and the silence stretched between us like a physical thing. Then Megan spoke, her voice quieter than before. She said she owed me an explanation. I told her she didn't owe me anything. Megan said that wasn't true, that she had left without saying why, and that had been wrong. I felt the anger rise in my chest, sharp and sudden. I told her it had been years, that whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. Megan looked at me, her face pale in the dim light. She said it mattered to her. Then she said something that made my hand stop moving. She said she had been pregnant when she left. The words hung in the air, cold and impossible. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Megan kept talking, her voice steady but strained. She said she had found out, a week after I proposed over the phone, that she had been terrified, that she didn't know what to do. And then before she could tell me she had lost the baby, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I asked why she hadn't told me. Megan said she didn't know how, that she had been young and scared and convinced she wasn't ready to be anyone's wife or mother. She said losing the baby had felt like proof that she wasn't meant for that life, that she would only fail me if she stayed. So she had left instead, and she had spent the years trying to forgive herself for it. I didn't know what to say. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something that felt like grief. I told her she should have trusted me, that I would have been there, that she didn't have to carry it alone. Megan said she knew that now, but back then, all she could see was how young and unprepared she was. She said leaving me was the worst thing she had ever done, and she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just wanted me to know the truth. I turned away from her, my hands gripping the fence post so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't want to hear this, didn't want to feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I told her she should go. Megan didn't argue. She said she was sorry, and then she walked back to the cruiser and drove away, leaving me alone in the dark with a truth I didn't know how to carry. Years earlier, I had driven hours to the city to meet Megan at a coffee shop near her campus. I had called her the week before and asked her to marry me. The words clumsy and rushed because I didn't know how else to say them. Megan had said yes, her voice breaking over the phone, and I had felt like the luckiest person alive. I had taken my grandmother's ring from the drawer where I kept it and driven to the city with it in my pocket, imagining the moment I would slide it onto her finger. But when I walked into the coffee shop, Megan was already sitting at a table near the window, her face pale and distant. I sat down across from her and pulled out the ring. But before I could say anything, Megan stopped me. She said she couldn't do it, that she had made a mistake, that she wasn't ready. I asked what had changed. Megan didn't answer. She just shook her head, her eyes red but dry, and pushed the ring back across the table. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the ring, trying to understand what had just happened. The barista had to ask me to leave when they closed, and even then I sat in my truck in the parking lot until late, hoping Megan would come back and tell me it was a mistake. But she didn't, and I drove home alone, the ring still in my pocket, the weight of it heavier than it had ever been. The memory faded, and I was back behind the barn, the fence half repaired, the night colder than it had been before. I looked down at my hands and realized they were shaking. I tried to steady them, but the shaking wouldn't stop. I thought about the baby Megan had lost, the one I had never known about, and felt something break inside me that I didn't know how to fix. Later, I heard from someone at the feed store that Megan had been offered a promotion. She would be moving to a lieutenant position in the city, they said, probably within the month. I felt the news like a punch to the chest. I didn't know why it surprised me. Of course, she would leave again. That was what Megan did. She built things and then walked away from them. And I had been a fool to think this time would be any different. I went home and threw myself into the work, fixing things that didn't need fixing, staying out in the fields until it was too dark to see. Ruth watched me from the kitchen window but didn't say anything. Lily asked if I was mad, and I told her no, I was just busy. But the truth was, I was preparing myself for the same loss all over again. And this time I told myself it wouldn't hurt as much because I already knew how it ended. I spent the next stretch of days avoiding anything that might bring me into contact with Megan. I sent Ruth into town for groceries. I skipped the farmer's market. I stayed on the farm from sunrise to well past dark, working until my body ached and my mind went quiet. Lily asked why we weren't going anywhere, and I told her it was a busy time that the farm needed me. She accepted it without argument the way she always did, but Ruth watched me with the same quiet concern she had shown for a while. One evening I was in the barn, checking the feed inventory, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the open door and saw the cruiser, its engine idling, headlights cutting through the dusk. I stayed where I was, hoping Megan would assume no one was home and leave. But the engine cut off, and a door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the gravel, slow and deliberate. Megan called my name from outside the barn. I didn't answer right away. I set down the clipboard I had been holding and walked to the doorway, keeping my expression blank. Megan stood a few feet away, still in uniform, her hands at her sides. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from more than just a long shift. She said she needed to talk to me. I told her there was nothing left to say. Megan said that wasn't true, that there was something I needed to know before I heard it from someone else. I felt my chest tighten. I asked what she meant. Megan said she had been offered the promotion, the one everyone in town was already talking about. She said it would mean moving back to the city, taking a position as lieutenant, the kind of opportunity most people spent years waiting for. I nodded slowly, my jaw tight. I told her congratulations and meant it to sound final, dismissive, but Megan didn't leave. She said she had turned it down. The words took a moment to register. I asked why. Megan said because she wasn't running anymore, that she had spent years trying to outrun the person she used to be. And it hadn't worked. She said Willow Creek was where she needed to be, not because of me, but because it was the only place she had ever felt like herself, even when she was too scared to admit it. I didn't know how to respond. I told her she was making a mistake, that she had worked too hard to throw it away for a town that had nothing to offer her. Megan said that wasn't for me to decide. She said she wasn't asking for my permission or my approval. She was telling me because I deserved to know, and because she owed me honesty, even if it came too late. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't expected. She wasn't the girl who had left me years ago, terrified and uncertain. She was someone else now, someone who had made her choice and was willing to live with it. I wanted to be angry, wanted to tell her she was being reckless, but the anger wouldn't come. All I felt was exhaustion, the kind that came from holding on to something too long. Megan said she would stay out of my way, that I didn't have to worry about running into her every time I went into town. She said she understood if I didn't want anything to do with her, that she wouldn't blame me. Then she turned and walked back toward the cruiser, her shoulders straight, her stride steady. I watched her go, and for the first time in a while, I felt something shift inside me. Something that felt almost like relief. That night, Ruth asked me what Megan had wanted. I told her the truth, that Megan was staying in Willow Creek, that she had turned down the promotion. Ruth nodded, unsurprised, and asked what I was going to do about it. I said there was nothing to do, that Megan's decision didn't change anything. Ruth looked at me with the same expression she had worn when I was 8 years old, and trying to convince her I didn't need help with my homework. She asked me if I was still protecting Lily or if I was just protecting myself. I didn't answer. Ruth set a hand on my shoulder and told me that fear was a poor reason to turn away from something real. She said I had been a good father, a good man, but that Lily needed more than just safety. She needed to see me take a risk, to show her that love was worth the possibility of pain. I said I didn't know if I could do that. Ruth said she thought I could, but I had to decide for myself. She reminded me of what my mother used to say, that the bravest thing a man could do was open his heart twice after it had been broken once. I went upstairs and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Ruth's words circling in my mind. I thought about Lily, about the way she looked at Megan with open curiosity and trust. I thought about the plastic badge she still carried in her backpack, the one Megan had given her at the hardware store. I thought about the life I had built, careful and controlled, and realized it had never been about protecting Lily. It had always been about protecting myself from the one thing I couldn't control, loss. A couple of mornings later, I was fixing the fence along the north pasture when I saw Megan's cruiser coming up the long driveway. I straightened, wiping my hands on my jeans, and watched as she parked near the house. She got out and walked toward me, not in uniform this time, just jeans and a jacket, her hands in her pockets. She stopped a few feet away and said she was sorry for showing up unannounced. I told her it was fine. Megan said she'd been thinking about what she wanted to say, that she had practiced it a dozen times, but now that she was standing here, none of it felt right. I waited. Megan took a breath and said she wasn't asking me to forgive her, that she didn't expect me to trust her, but she wanted me to know that she wasn't leaving. Not this time, not for a promotion, not for anything. She said she had made a choice years ago out of fear, and it had been the wrong choice. She said she couldn't undo it, couldn't go back and be the person I needed her to be. But she could be someone different now, someone who stayed, who showed up, who didn't run when things got hard. She said if I didn't want that, she would understand. But she wasn't going to disappear just because it was easier. I looked at her, and for the first time since she had come back, I let myself see the truth. She wasn't asking for a second chance. She was offering one not to me, but to both of us. A chance to build something that didn't rely on the past, that didn't carry the weight of what had been lost. I thought about what Ruth had said, about taking a risk, about showing Lily that love was worth it. I asked Megan if she wanted coffee. The words came out simple, almost casual, but they felt heavier than anything I had said in years. Megan looked at me, surprise flickering across her face, and then she nodded. She said yes, she would like that. I gestured toward the house, and we walked together across the yard. The silence between us no longer sharp, but something softer, something that felt like the beginning of understanding. Inside, Ruth was at the kitchen table with Lily, helping her with a coloring book. Lily looked up when we walked in and smiled at Megan, holding up the picture she had been working on. Megan crouched down to look at it, complimenting the color Lily had chosen, and Lily beamed. Ruth met my eyes over their heads, her expression warm and knowing, and I felt something loosen in my chest. I made coffee, the simple act grounding me, giving me something to do with my hands. Megan sat at the table with Lily and Ruth, answering Lily's questions about police work, about the cruiser, about whether she had ever arrested a bad guy. She answered patiently, kindly, and I realized this was what I had been afraid of. Not that Megan would leave again, but that she would stay, and I would have to decide whether I was brave enough to let her. When the coffee was ready, I set a cup in front of Megan and sat down across from her. Lily asked if Megan could come back and visit again, and Megan said she would like that if it was okay with me. Lily looked at me, her eyes wide and hopeful. I said it was okay. Lily grinned and went back to her coloring. Satisfied, Ruth stood and said she needed to check on something in the barn, taking Lily with her, despite Lily's protests. The door closed behind them, and Megan and I were alone. Megan wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, her gaze steady. She said she didn't expect this to be easy, that she knew it would take time. I said I knew that too. Megan asked if I thought it was worth trying. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window at the fields, at the barn, at the life I had built from the ruins of what I thought I had lost. I said I didn't know, but I was willing to find out. Megan nodded, and something in her expression softened, something that looked almost like hope. We sat there in the quiet kitchen drinking coffee. not saying much, but it was enough. It was a start. Months later, the farm looked the same as it always had, but the rhythm of it had changed. Megan came by on her days off, helping with small repairs, sitting with Lily while I worked, becoming part of the landscape in a way that felt gradual and real. She didn't push, didn't ask for more than I was ready to give, and slowly the walls I had built began to come down. Lily adored her, and Ruth approved in her quiet, knowing way. I found myself looking forward to the sound of Megan's car in the driveway, to the easy conversation over coffee, to the moments when our hands would brush and neither of us would pull away. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when the past felt too heavy, when I wondered if I was making a mistake. But there were more days when it felt right, when I looked at Megan and saw not the girl who had left me, but the woman who had chosen to stay. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Megan and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The golden light caught the deep brown of my skin as I leaned back in my chair, more relaxed than I had been in years. Megan said she was glad she had come back. I said I was too, and realized I meant it. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I let her. The weight of it familiar and grounding. I thought about love, about the way it required risk, required trust, required the willingness to be hurt again, and I thought maybe that was the point. Not to avoid the pain, but to choose the possibility of something real, even knowing it might not last. I looked out at the fields, at the life I had built, and knew it was no longer just mine. It was ours, fragile and uncertain, but growing stronger every day. And that, I thought, was enough. As I sat on the porch that evening with Megan's head resting gently on my shoulder, watching the sun paint the fields of Willow Creek in that soft golden light, a truth settled deep in my chest that I wish I'd learned years earlier. Life has this way of breaking your heart clean in two and then quietly handing the pieces back when you least expect it, asking if you're finally brave enough to try again. For so long, I kept my walls high, convinced that protecting Lily and myself from more pain meant never letting anyone close, especially not the woman who once walked away without a word. But Megan's return showed me the real lesson. The bravest thing any of us can do is open our hearts again after they've been shattered, to choose forgiveness over fear and staying over running. Love isn't safe or simple, but it's worth every risk because the alternative is a life half-lived, full of what-ifs and quiet regrets. Second chances don't erase the past, they just give you the chance to write a better future, one honest conversation, one shared cup of coffee at a time. If you're carrying old hurts or wondering whether to let someone back in, know this: real healing starts the moment you decide you're worth the risk. What about you? Have you ever been afraid to open your heart again? Drop your own story in the comments below. I read every single one, and they remind me I'm not alone in this. And if this touched something in you, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our little family here. We're sharing more raw, heartfelt stories like this every week. Your support means the world.